Our issues, our voices, our views. This is Politics in Black. What's happening, family? We are back. It's Sunday, and we are live for another episode of Politics in Black, brought to you by 80 West Los Angeles. Once again, I'm only one half of your hosting team. My name is Chad Brown. Sitting across from me, fresh off vacation, is Friday Jones. Friday, say what's up to the people.
Hey, everybody. I hope that you are prepared because today we're taking a deep dive. And we're going to ask some hard questions for the sponsors, if you will, of HR 40 today.
Yeah. We're going to dig into HR 40. And as the family knows, there have already been some excellent critical analyses done of HR 40. Shout out to BTP, Be the Power. Indeedy. Shout out to Yvette Cardinell and Antonio Moore. Each have done an excellent job in analysis of HR 40, pointing out not only the issues, but some of the corrections that we need made. And so what we wanted to do today is come to you with the foremost expert in the field, Dr. Sandy Darity, and make sure we give him a chance to voice not only his edits to the bill, but also talk through some of the issues and, quite frankly, some of the improprieties that we might see attached to this bill. So I'm ready to go Friday, as usual. This is going to be a good one. This is the reparationist work today, so I'm ready to get into it.
I am a reparationist.
Let's do it. So unless you've been living under a rock, you know our next guest. He is a Duke professor. He is the foremost authority in reparations for Black Americans. Indeed. He's been in this space studying, doing God's work for over 3 decades. He is the expert in the field, and you know here we want to talk to the experts. So you know him, you love him. Please welcome to the podcast, Mr. Dr. Sandy Darity.
Woohoo!
Dr. Darity, it's always great to see you. Thanks for joining us again on Politics in Black here.
It's wonderful to be with you.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Darity, we're going to get right in because a lot has been going on. There's something rotten in Denmark, so we definitely want to start. Definitely want to start talking about these things and starting with HR 40. So, and first off, I wanted to just dive right into some of the edits and some of the corrections because you have been outspoken and vocal on HR 40. You have submitted written testimony that was read into the congressional record at the June 19th HR 40 hearing on the Hill. You have been tireless in your critiques and your criticisms of HR 40. So I really wanted to start there, if okay with you, and then we can talk about how that ties into some of the misconceptions in general around reparations. How's that sound?
Sounds fine.
Perfect. So number one on my list, and I've read through HR 40 a couple times leading up to this, and that bill puts reparations into the context of a 1619 project, basically, sort of like in the New York Times. And so in your written testimony and in some of the corrections that you have submitted, you make, and what I think is a very valid argument, that the appropriate time window is 1776 to present. So could you talk us through a little bit how you came to that? And because it makes perfect sense to me, but I want to make sure that the audience gets a chance to hear it from you.
Yeah. Before I do that, in addition to shout outs for the Be the Power brothers and for Yvette and Antonio, I'd like to also especially provide a shout out for Houston ADOS.
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed.
Absolutely. We were going to get there. We were going to get there.
Have been amazing in developing a number of ways of trying to communicate the message that HR 40 needs to be changed.
Yeah. And if the family sticks around,
since they are in Representative Sheila Jackson Lee's district, their actions are especially important.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to say thank you to them.
We appreciate that. And we're actually going to show one of those later on in the show from ADOS Houston, because they are doing the work on this bill on HR 40 in Sheila Jackson Lee's district. This is her bill, so we understand how important that is.
Yeah.
So there is a letter that Kirsten Mullen and I sent to Representative Sheila Jackson Lee listing revisions that we thought should take place in the bill. I think we sent this about a month or a month and a half ago, and we never have received any response. But in terms of your specific question about what the starting point should be for listing the atrocities that have been inflicted on Black Americans. We insist that it should be 1776, unlike the existing legislation, H.R. 40, where they place 1619 as the starting point. And the reason we feel this way is because we've argued, especially in our book From Here to Equality, that the account that we want to establish for the Bill of Particulars has to start with the foundation of the Republic. That is, with the beginning of the existence of the United States government. There was no United States government in 1619.
Correct.
And in fact, trying to make a reparations claim dating from that point leads to all types of ambiguities about who the charges should be presented to. So in our letter to Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, we said the following: the relevant window for the Black American claim for reparation dates from 1776 to the present, not 1619 as the bill currently reads. Since the claim for redress must be made on the U.S. government, the beginning date for the claim should be associated with the founding of the Republic, not the landing of enslaved persons at Jamestown, Virginia.
It makes perfect sense to me. The United States government is the culpable party, correct? So before 1776,
you had Mexico, you had France, you had Spain, everybody.
You had the Dutch. I mean,
right?
Yeah.
The list is endless.
No, that makes perfect sense to me, Dr. Darity. I don't see anyone being able to contest that, and I'm sure they'll try.
But it does bring up one of the arguments of people saying, like, we've heard people say, "Oh, well, what about the freedmen?" But I've never shy away from my lineage. We got the Irish folks. The Irish folks owned the African folks. I have the indigenous and I have the Caribbean, and I know my Caribbean family arrived in the early 1900s, 1912 to be specific, my great-grandfather. But, I mean, he clearly married into essentially an ADOS situation. And so can you talk about this idea of, well, we need this year and this time to account for these people? Because I don't know how those people didn't mix in. I mean, I don't know.
So I think this issue also has arisen in the context of the California legislation, AB 3121?
Yes, you got it right.
Correct,
yeah. And in the context of that bill, the language establishing who the task force should be designing reparations proposals for raises this question. And I believe that that Yvette and Antonio have suggested that the legislation should read that the task force should be intended to study and develop reparations proposals for African Americans solely for Black American descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. And then I suggested that there was a still simpler alternative to study and develop reparations proposals for Black American descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. Now, my impression is that Representative Weber, Dr. Weber, is concerned about the omission of individuals whose families had free status the entire time of enslavement, and I guess maintained free status during the period after the Civil War in terms of not actually intermarrying with Black folks who had been enslaved or who were descendants of persons who were enslaved. I'm not sure how large those numbers are.
I was going to say how that seems so rare and obscure.
Yeah, they seem to be fairly rare, but also I'm wondering how sympathetic I should be towards the case that might be made for folks who are coming from families that sort of maintain some sort of purity of bloodline. They somehow avoided intermarrying.
We're not doing purity tests.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna speak here because again, so my Irish descendants owned my African descendants, and there was some intergenerational marrying because they were from a small, like, rural town, and you see that actually in my family tree. But again, it didn't stay there, if that makes sense. It did not stay there. Mm-hmm. Now, if this was 100 years ago,
it would have had to stay there from 1865 to 2010 or so.
Right.
Yeah, but okay. So all of that said, there are ways you could make an accommodation, but it would require you to set some type of date limit in terms of defining or identifying who is eligible. Mm-hmm. And I would, if people are insistent on going that direction, then I think the date limits have to be either 1964 or 1954. 1964 being the date of the Civil Rights Act, 1954 being the date of the Brown versus Ford decision. Mm-hmm. And so then there would have to be some way of ensuring that the folks who were eligible had ancestors who were present in the United States, who were citizens in the United States prior to 1964 or 1954, and who also were identified as Black in the United States Census or Negro or the equivalent.
And doing the language like that would preclude having to go back to 1619 because you're just saying before this more modern date. Yeah. We don't even have to explore. The reason I'm asking that, there was a question from the chat that says, well, again, what about the years between 1619 and 1776? Because it's almost 100 years, but with the language that you are suggesting, we could cover, in theory, that time period by just putting in that specific language.
And since we're kind of broaching on one of the second points that you make about HR 40, and that's eligibility criteria. So who is eligible for reparations, right? And I know you propose a two-pronged standard, a lineage standard and an identity standard. Could you talk to us a little bit about that? Because reading through HR 40, those standards are not talked about. It's mostly descendants of Africans enslaved.
So let me go to the identity standard first, because I've been concerned that when people refer to African Americans without any greater specificity, that in principle you could include white South Africans who migrated to the United States. And in fact, frequently the folks who are critical of the ADO's position say that you would have to have DNA tests. But in fact, if you take the position that you're going to identify persons of African origin in the United States as the eligible recipients, that's the circumstances under which you probably would have to use some kind of DNA test. And so that's absolutely not what we have in mind. Our idea for an identity standard is that individuals would have had to have shown that they self-identified as Black, Negro, or African American for at least 12 years prior to the enactment of a reparations plan or a study commission for reparations, whichever comes first. And the premise here is that people should not be allowed to suddenly declare themselves to be Black as soon as there appears to be some kind of financial or monetary advantage associated with being Black in the United States, something that has never been the case.
Never been the case.
It's going to be a bunch of transracials. There's going to be a bunch of transracials in the 2020 census.
Yeah, that's right. So, that's what we're trying to bypass.
Okay. Exactly.
So that's the identity standard. And you would only need the identity standard if you moved in the direction of setting some sort of date cutoff for ancestors. Yes. But if you stick with the original approach that we had in mind, which is a focus on persons who are descendants, Black American persons who are descendants of folks who were enslaved in the United States, then you would need to use our lineage standard. And the lineage standard says that individuals would need to show that they have at least one ancestor who was enslaved in the United States. And that's it. So that means that someone who was enslaved in the United States between 1776 and 1865.
Makes sense, Dr. Darity. And before going on to like the third one of the third essential edits that you put forward, what you're talking about there is specificity. So specificity on eligible recipients. And so one of the things I went back, because I've heard you talk about the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. So I went back and pulled that act and read through it. That was commonly known as the Reparations for Japanese Internment Act. And in that legislation, it is hyper specific.
It's super specific.
It outlines exactly who, Americans of Japanese ancestry that were interned should receive reparations. But then it goes a step further to outline who is excluded out of that reparations claim. And so could you talk to us a little bit, because I'm reading that, it just baffles me how HR 40 is so non-specific. So could you talk to us a little bit about what you see in the shortfalls between the Civil Liberties Act of 88 and what we see as the current version of HR 40?
Well, I think that the Civil Liberties Act of 88 also was supplemented by a series of amendments. I just learned this recently, that were adopted in 1992, which meant that I think individuals who were heirs of the victims, the direct victims, also could receive some form of compensation. So I think people falsely believe that it is only the direct victims who received compensation as in the course of the American Civil Liberties Act of 1988. So I think what's important is to recognize that there was no piggybacking associated with whom would receive compensation or restitution from the American Civil Liberties Act of 1988. There was no attempt to say, well, there are all these other communities that have been subjected to harms, and so they also should be included.
Yeah, that seems to be the new Democratic Party cry, unfortunately.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And that was not the case. And it should not have been the case. I mean, there's a certain amount of integrity that each community that has a charge that it can bring against the United States government should be able to preserve. There's no reason we should dilute these claims or spread them out, and in part because they are not the same claims. So, for example, I think at some point, the Democratic Party presidential candidate, Joe Biden, said, well, he might consider reparations if it included Native Americans. Yes. He might consider what we would otherwise think of as Black reparations. And my feeling is that that's really a problem, because the two types of reparations claims that are associated with the Native Black American population and the indigenous population of the United States are quite distinct. The indigenous American claim for reparations is associated with a claim for sovereignty, greater sovereignty. Mm-hmm. But the Native Black American claim is for the material conditions for full citizenship. And so sovereignty and citizenship are not identical types of objectives.
Absolutely.
And so if we were going to craft a reparations program for Native Americans, it would have to be separate from the one that is being crafted for Black American descendants of U.S. slavery.
That makes perfect sense. And staying on the Civil Liberties Act of 88, another thing that I noticed was it went extensively into the actual payment mechanisms for reparations. So it didn't stop at just, we are going to form a commission to study, but here is how we will actually pay out restitution to the eligible recipients. And that included a component of education It included a component, obviously, of direct cash payments, but and trust funds and things like that. But I see none of that in HR 40.
It's none of it. And what for us, the time wise, it's a 1 year difference. Like, I need the audience to understand there's a 1 year difference between the reparations 88 for
civil liberties,
right,
and in 89 when John Conyers first brought HR 40. So yes. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Darity.
No, go on.
No,
I just wanted the audience to know that, because for context, because we hear, HR 40 has been around, for decades, but when you look at the language comparatively, there was so much more included in the Act of 88 that is totally not there in the Act of 89. And even when you look at who gets to choose members, if you will, to participate, Congress gets to choose versus this bill that, I don't know, HR 40 is almost like a free-for-all.
It's a little bit tricky because HR 40 is for a commission.
Okay.
And so that legislation really needs to be compared against the 1980 legislation that created the commission that provided the report that was the prelude to the Civil Liberties Act of 1988.
Gotcha.
And that 1980 legislation created something that was called the Commission on Wartime Relocation and the Internment of Civilians. Mm-hmm. That's what's really parallel with the commission that's proposed under HR 40. And to some degree, the language of HR 40 was borrowed from the language of the 1980 legislation, but it wasn't borrowed in full, and a lot of it has not been maintained. And may I talk about what I think are the most significant changes?
I know where you're going, Dr. Darity, and I think we're going to the second half. I think we want to hammer and stay there, but just quickly. To wrap up this first half of the show, I wanted to talk about the goals of HR 40, because as I read it through, obviously it establishes this commission to study proposals for reparations, but it does not state the goal of reparations. And so in your essential edits, what you state is that reparations should be put forth with the ultimate goal of closing the lineage wealth gap. That is the goal here. So could you talk a little bit about not only the shortfall in HR 40 of not addressing that, but then why you view that as the ultimate goal of reparations?
So I think what's critical from my standpoint is that the commission should not have complete discretion about the content of its report.
Yes.
The commission needs to have direction as to what its report ultimately says. And so that's why I think that the legislation for the commission should provide substantive directives for the commission about what it should accomplish in providing its report. Mm-hmm. And so I've emphasized in some of the work that I've done, and in some of the work that I've done in conjunction with Kirsten Mullen and with Dania Frank Francis much earlier, we've placed an emphasis on this notion that the eligibility condition should be built into the commission's charge.
Yes.
Okay. But in addition, because we are increasingly convinced that racial wealth differentials are the most effective indicator of the cumulative intergenerational economic effects of white supremacy, that elimination of those racial wealth differentials should be a central objective or goal of a reparations plan, and the commission should be charged with writing a report that places that objective at the heart of what a reparations project should accomplish. And then the third thing that should be part of the directives that go to the commission is that a predominant use of the funds that are intended to achieve the goal of eliminating the racial wealth gap must be direct payments to eligible recipients.
Got it.
And I think it's vital that those conditions be built into the legislation. As my good friend Otis Griffin frequently says,
shout out Otis.
In one shape or another, there's many a slip betwixt cup and the lip, and we don't want that slip. Okay,
absolutely.
We want to make sure that the commission produces a report that achieves the kinds of objectives that what we think is an appropriate reparations program should accomplish. Mm-hmm. And so the commission needs to be constrained, and the legislation should produce those constraints.
Correct.
And this is especially important because we don't actually know who will be on the commission.
That's a priority and a concern.
Absolutely.
That's a major concern right now.
And that's a great segue, Dr. Darity. So we're here, so let's get into it. So as I understand it, and this bill obviously introduced in '89 by John Conyers, then reintroduced after John Conyers left Congress in '19 by Sheila Jackson Lee. So this is H.R. 40 is her bill. And prior to her reintroduction, though, in was it 2015? In the 114th session of Congress, 2015-16,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, the bill was substantially changed. It was substantially rewritten, and additional, context and content was added to the bill. Can you talk to us about that change? Like what happened in between 15-16 and then 16-17, as far as like the introduction of this new content?
So there are two dimensions of the bill that I think we have to really be aware of that were changed between 2015, 2016, and 2016, 2017. And I also want to say, I want to be very direct about this. We know full well who rewrote the bill.
We want to name names. We want to know. This affects us all. We want to know.
It's the National Coalition on Black Reparations for America, or NCOBRA, mm-hmm. and their allies, particularly NARC, the National African American Reparations Commission, which is essentially the Institute for the Black World. So that's kind of the nexus that was involved in rewriting the bill.
And as I understand it, they've been very involved with H.R. 40 for a long time. Is that correct?
Yes, they have.
Okay.
Yes, they have.
Okay.
And as a sign of respect, I want to acknowledge their long-term involvement
Absolutely.
with the bill, particularly at a point in which the bill was not really getting much attention. But the difficulty is they have actively rewritten the bill in such a way that they have written themselves into the bill as the controlling agents. And the way they did this was, first of all, by changing the number of commissioners. Mm-hmm. So in the 2015-2016 version, there were 7 commissioners who were specified. 3 to be appointed by the president, 3 to be appointed by the Speaker of the House, and 1 to be appointed by the President pro tempore of the Senate. Mm-hmm. So 7 positions for a congressional commission. It's never been entirely clear to me why the president would have any authority to appoint anyone to a congressional commission.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, if the president were to appoint a commission of his or her own, which they could do, typically in the past, when such commissions have been appointed, the president didn't delegate any responsibility for the appointment process to Congress. Mm-hmm. The president made all the appointments himself.
Got it.
And so similarly, I think Congress should make all of the appointments of this commission, but
and we have to ask Dr. Darity, do you think that was written in '89 with the intent to set up failure? I mean, this originated in Congress. Why would
we give up control?
Why would we give control if we didn't have to? If it's congressional and it
don't
should
know.
stay
It
there?
may be that they were trying to replicate what they thought was in the 1980 enabling legislation for the commission for for Japanese American reparations. I'm not sure. That commission was actually larger. I think it was ultimately, it was either nine, I think it was 9 people ultimately.
Yeah.
It was slightly larger. But now I'm not sure what the rationale was for assigning 3 of the positions to the president. Okay. But when we come to the 2016-2017 version, suddenly there are 13 commissioners.
13. Okay, so we added 6.
Yeah, and so there's 6 additional commissioners that have been included, and they are supposed to be representative of advocacy groups that have played a historical role in promoting reparations.
I actually have the language here, Dr. Darity. So this is Section 4 under membership, item D. 6 members shall be selected from major civil society and reparations organizations that have historically championed the cause of reparatory justice.
Yeah. So the key adjective is historically, right?
Yes.
Because there aren't that many civil society and advocacy groups that have promoted reparations from a longer term basis.
Absolutely.
And so since we know that NCOBRA and their allies rewrote the bill, it's fairly clear that they have established these additional 6 positions with the expectation that they would fill those positions.
So now let's just slow down. I want to slow down just for 1 second for the people watching. So as I understand it now, we have 3 members appointed by the president, and we know who the current president is, and we know who potentially could be the president. Neither one of them are reparations supporters. Then we have 3 members that would be...
Well, and I would add the previous president prior to the current one.
We'd have to go back pretty far to find a president that'd be supportive, right? So then we have 3 members that would be appointed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Under the current state, that would be Nancy Pelosi, who is also not supportive of reparations. Then we have 1 member who would be appointed by the President pro tempore of the Senate, and that would be Mitch McConnell, who is on record saying, I align with Obama.
I think it's Mitch McConnell's second in command, and I'm not sure exactly.
Okay.
Off the top of my head.
Okay.
I don't remember who that is.
So not actually Mitch, but
someone. It would be a Republican.
It would be a Republican, and probably who reflects the same views as a McConnell, right? So now we have in the 16-17 version that was rewritten by NCOBRA, we have 7 members on the Reparations Commission that are aligned to peoples who they have a majority on the commission that are aligned with an ideology of we don't believe in or we don't support reparations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we're dead in the water right there, as I understand it. Like that, they have a majority.
Or we're going to have all people programs, which tends to be the
except that if the 6 representatives of these reparations advocacy groups could get 1 more person to swing to their side, then they would have a majority. Interest on the commission.
Gotcha.
But the problem is, NCOBRA and their allies have a vision of what reparations should look like.
So we're going to stop you right there,
inconsistent with ours.
Yeah,
Dr. Darity, we're going to put a pause because we have to do a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to pick up right there.
We're going to follow, when we come back, folks, we're going to follow the money. We're going to follow the money when we come back with Dr. Darity, okay? So we'll be back in about a minute and a half or so. Stick with us. We got a lot more to unpack here. Dr. Darity, hold that.
You live.
And we're back.
Okay, so we've heard the name NCOBRA, we've heard the name NARC, and before we hop in here, I just want to put this out here. Our guest for today's show actually was supposed to be one of the co-chairs of NCOBRA, and that would have been Cam Howard. And he, unfortunately, he had confirmed, and about 3 days ago, he sent his regrets and said that he would not be able to be present because we wanted to have the conversation about their thought process. And since there are differences in terms of what Dr. Darity has expressed and what ADOS believes should be in this HR 40 legislation, today we're going to talk about that instead. The co-chair, Cam Howard, is certainly welcome to come back and have this conversation with us in terms of their thought process and why they have taken certain positions. But for right now, for today, we're going to continue on with Dr. Darity, and we're going to talk about the differences in ideologies in terms of what HR 40 currently is versus what it should be. So, Dr. Darity, let's bring you back in here.
First, let me say I'm hoping to tune into the Simmons College event myself.
We're looking forward to it. We're looking forward to it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So there are two issues I want to raise. One is an issue of impropriety, and the second issue is one of a false agenda or a mistaken agenda. So the impropriety issue is the following. In addition to increasing the number of commissioners between the 2015, 2016, and 2016, 2017 versions of HR 40, the budget was increased from $8 million to $12 million.
Whoa.
Now, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a lot of money if you're thinking about
That's a lot to me, Dr. Derek. There's a lot to me.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, it could be a lot of money from the standpoint of any one of us individuals. And what's notable about the legislation is that it has a provision for compensation or salaries for the commissioners themselves.
And I actually have that provision here in front of me, Dr. Darius. So let me read that real quick. Compensation. Except as provided in paragraph 2, each member of the commission shall receive compensation at the daily equivalent of the annual rate of basic pay payable for GS 18 of the general schedule under section 5332 of Title 5 United States Code. So I actually had to go and look up GS 18.
GS 18.
I had never heard of that before. But that is actually the highest pay scale available under this code. Right. So we're talking about upwards of $200,000 per annum per year. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
That's right.
That's a pretty good paying job.
If you can get it,
where I'm from,
if you can get it, it's a nice, take home, as they say.
And
right.
One of the other things, Dr. Darity, that I wanted to call out here, because as we look, we see a lot of reparations bills popping up kind of around the country, right?
Everywhere, New York, right? Chicago, Illinois.
Absolutely. And so I looked at, obviously we're involved here with AB 3121, trying to make sure that we are good stewards and making sure that language is solid and gets us to the goal. But I took a look at at New York at 3080A, which is in the 2019-2020 regular session in Assembly right now. And so when we talk about
there's no subtlety in
there's
that
no subtlety
in
this bill at all. So when we talk about membership, we are actually seeing people named as far as who would be on this commission or who would be allowed to select to this commission. So I just want to quickly read section 4, membership from there. From the New York bill. The commission shall be composed of 14 members who shall be appointed within 90 days after the effective date of this act. 1 member appointed by the governor, 1 member appointed by the Speaker of Assembly, 1 member appointed by the temporary president of the Senate. Okay, but then we get down and we see 3 members shall be appointed by the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, in COBRA. 3 members shall be appointed by the December 12th movement, and then 3 members shall be appointed by Dr. Ron Daniels of the Institute of the Black World. So that is very, very specific in naming the people that we expect to be on this New York commission, and presumably the same that would expect to be on the HR 40 commission. Is that the understanding here?
That's my impression, and I would point out also that Dr. Ron Daniels is the head of NARC.
Thank you for that.
So here's my issue, and I've been saying this a couple of days on Twitter. Just imagine if there were 50 state commissions individually written with this similar language that was willing to provide compensation to the same group of individuals for doing reparations work and not having any specific time limit like HR 40, not being required to produce anything, not having an actual directive in the language. It is like a gold mine of payday for, I have been at this work for 30 years, and at this point, if it's our time, I am going to get mine. And the problem that I see with it is all of these people have the potential to be paid, and yet ADOS people have the potential to have nothing at the end of the day.
Yeah, they want to run off with the reparations. That's what it sounds like to me.
Well.
Let me add something that may confirm that. I think it's important to look at NARC's 10-point plan for reparations, and in particular their preamble, because the preamble makes it clear that they seem to be identifying anybody who is of African descent in the United States as being eligible for reparations. And so I think that would inform what they would try to do on a commission where there was no constraint on the eligibility conditions.
Absolutely.
But the other thing is they want to establish something that they call a National Reparations Trust Authority, which would manage the reparations funds. Now, there's no specifics indicated in their preamble or in their list of 10 points about whom would be the individuals who would handle that authority. But I think that since that's ambiguous, that's a problem.
That is.
And that's another reason why it's imperative that the funds go directly to the eligible recipients so they can exercise their discretion over how they're used, rather than somebody else making a decision or a judgment about where the funds should go.
And as an ADOS co-chair for ADOS Los Angeles, this is my challenge. And again, I have given NCOBRA their dues, right? Their respect for, you have been in this fight for decades. You have managed to keep this bill alive. It's inappropriate, I think, to see it as a personal payday. This is the work of millions of people, and it's important work. So I don't want to take away the things that they've done. However, as a co-chair of ADOS Los Angeles, and there are other chapters across the country that are newly breathing life, if you will, into the reparations work. I think without us, there would be no discussion. However you want to look at it, I think in Cobra, around the time that, what's her name, who's now the VP person, Kamala Harris, came out at Howard University to express her desire to be the president of the United States. I think NCOBRA had like maybe 100, maybe, I'm being generous. I don't think they had 100 people, because I remember learning about them and going, well, okay, who are they? Where are they? Where's their visibility? And I think that they have had a jump start on establishing relationships on the Hill. These are boomers who have been around. They were around in the 50s and 60s, and they lived this experience. And I can't take that away from them any more than I could take the experience away from my mother and father. I can't take their lives away from them. However, now that we're sort of this next generation, I think it is it's problematic for this language to be written in a way where none of our ADOS chapters could participate as potential commissioners in this space. None of the people that I know who are personally doing this work can participate in this space. And not even that, you don't have regular ADOS people who also have their lived experiences who could be of value on such a commission to be allowed to be in that space. And for me, that's problematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I'd add to that, Dr. Darity, is what I don't see is where are the experts? Where are the academics? Where are the historians? Where are the people who bring salient and relevant knowledge to this process to be able to, that informs a reparations proposal that would actually be actionable and effective? And I know that's one of the edits that you bring to bear. Is like this commission should be made up of experts. Could you talk a little bit about your opinion?
And the experts don't necessarily have to be commissioners.
Right.
They could be contracted.
A professional staff to support the commission that would conduct the administrative work, but would also conduct the relevant research and ultimately write the draft of their report, which is what normally happens with other commissions. It's not the commissioners who do the bulk of the research or the initial phase of writing. And we said in our letter to Sheila Jackson Lee that there should be experts in American history, constitutional law, economics, political science, and sociology. There should be experts on the history of slavery and the Jim Crow regime, employment discrimination, wealth inequality, health disparities, unequal education opportunity, criminal justice and mass incarceration, media, political participation and exclusion from voting, and housing inequities as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think
could we throw the military in there? Could we please throw the military in there?
That's a great suggestion. That's a great suggestion. Yeah. But that's the core idea, that there's so many arenas in which we have been subjected to substantial disadvantage, that we need to make sure that whatever report is produced covers all of that terrain.
Absolutely. No, that makes perfect sense to me, Dr. Darity. And the final essential edit that I read from you was that you're trying to inject some integrity back in this process by saying commissioners should not be paid. So no GS-18 level pay. We shouldn't be paying folks $200,000 a year to do what is a duty. A duty. Yeah,
I mean, a stipend is one thing. A stipend is reasonable childcare, reimbursed travel, hotel expenses.
Absolutely. I mean, if people are confronted with expenses, those should be reimbursed, reasonable expenses. But people should not be paid a salary to serve on a commission of this type.
Absolutely.
Impropriety that jeopardizes our first substantial opportunity to get on the path towards reparations for Black American descendants of U.S. slavery. That type of impropriety is really, really dangerous and deadly.
Yeah.
Shouldn't happen.
Can we get into some of these misconceptions? We talked a little bit about one. We have a question from the chat. Someone wants to know your opinion on the language in the California AB 3121, which I think you expressed earlier in the show. So unless you have something more to add to that, I kind of want to transition us back into some of these misconceptions, because we often see them in the Twitter sphere, but for people who may be watching, unfamiliar with ADOS, learning for the first time, I think it's important that we address that also in this segment here that we have, in the time we have with you.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, I sent Dr. Weber a message with an array of suggestions for language change. But the other one that I think is really important is in the appointment section again, where I think the legislation currently says the governor's appointees shall include all of the following. One appointee from the field of academia that has expertise in civil rights. One, okay. and 2 appointees from major civil society and reparations organizations that have historically championed the cause of reparatory justice.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's the NCOBRA language, once again, in the California legislation.
And one of the things we're doing is fighting to try to get that historically removed. I was just told that by our local legislator here, Marcus Champion. That's something that we're working on. So if that was to be amended and we remove historically, do you see that being a little more open-ended and not necessarily kind of like greasing the wheels for, impropriety?
Certainly would help.
Okay, absolutely. Okay. Well, so I don't know that much about NCOBRA. I hadn't heard of them until I got involved in ADOS and the reparations push. And, I saw them, open up their Twitter account.
My mom knows who they are.
Like last year. I think their
but
Twitter account started in 2019.
We're from New York.
Yeah.
We're from Brooklyn. She probably knows some of them personally if we go deep enough.
I went quickly to the website.
Well, I just want to say they are impressive from the standpoint of having a tremendous amount of influence and clout without having a constituency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they are definitely pushing their narrative and their versions of, I won't even call it reparations, but their versions of bills at the local level across the country and at the federal level with HR 40. So I just quickly went to their website because I wanted to learn more. And the first thing I see on their website, and folks do this at home, NCOBRAonline.org, the first thing is why we can't wait, right? And that's kind of been the theme of their marching orders, why we can't wait. And so now after this conversation, I see why they can't wait because there's
$200,000 on the line. Per commission, possibly on the table.
There's possibly on the table.
And I would add, as the Be the Power team pointed out, there's also a provision in the legislation for providing contract work to organizations that will support the commission. And there's no limitations in the legislation about whom is eligible to receive the contract work. Mm-hmm. So it would not there is the possibility not only of the individual representatives receiving a salary, but there's also the possibility of the organizations that they belong receiving contracts.
And I want to hop in here because when Juneteenth seemed to happen, you, Antonio, Yvette were with Dr. Cosby doing the Angelus Project, right? And you weren't available to be in person at the judiciary hearing. There was a team of ADOS chapters from across the nation that came up with the petition because we wanted to advocate to ensure that your voice was being heard and also to advocate for ourselves. And our recommended experts, I'm just going to put it out here, were Yvette Carnell, Antonio Moore, Dr. Kevin Cosby, Dr. Tracy McCarthy, Dr. Joy DeGroy, Dr. Claude Anderson, Paul Kyle, who's from ProPublica, Ted Reed, who is at Morgan Stanley. He's one of their fund managers there. We had some attorneys that we had called out, some black attorneys that we called out. Michelle Alexander, a civil rights attorney. We called out Mahersa Baradaran. We know her book well here, The Color of Money. Josh Poe, who's an urban planner. This list kind of goes on and on and on, but the idea that only NCOBRA or an organization like NCOBRA has experts that they would bring contractually into this space, the assumption is almost like ADOS is too immature. ADOS is not educated enough. ADOS doesn't know enough, but we know enough from our own network, from our own research, from our own reading to say, hey, these are the experts that we want. And I think when you bring up the fact that these are people who are powerful, who are moving with mayors and governors, and they're moving on Capitol Hill, and they don't have a constituency, and we are effectively the constituency, that disconnect can't exist for too long. it can't exist for too long. And I don't know, when they are the grandfather organization, if you will, what they need to do to sort of get into a dialogue with ADOS. But the idea that we are supposed to beat to their drum, I think, is inappropriate. We're seeing a lot of problems here with these languages and with their flexing of their muscle, if you will, in a way that we cannot. But what we do have is each other and our ability to self-advocate. Yeah. And we will continue. ADOS, I don't know who's listening.
We ain't going nowhere.
We are not going anywhere. Yeah. We will continue to self-advocate because this affects us and it affects the generations that come behind us.
So, Dr. Darity, just real quick on H.R. 40, because we also have companion bill S-1083 in the Senate, right? Cory Booker's bill. Do we see the same language repeated in that, or is that a better bill?
It's the same bill.
Same,
literally.
It's the same bill. There was no attempt to write a different version in the Senate.
So we need to be letting Cory Booker know. We need to be letting Sheila Jackson Lee know all these issues inherent in the very distinct and thick air of impropriety that's surrounding both H.R. 40, S-1083, the New York bill. We need to be letting our lawmakers and our representatives know that this don't smell right.
And we might as well say to Sheila Jackson Lee, ADOS Houston has reached out. They've been on your calendar to meet with your staffers for 3 times. At this point, I think it would be just and fair for you to sit down with ADOS Houston. They're your constituents. They are persons who would be affected by this reparations legislation. And after 3 misschedulings, moving of a schedule with staffers, it would be appropriate at this point for Sheila Jackson Lee to go ahead and meet with ADOS Houston. Karen Bass met with us. And so you've got to meet like with like. And so she didn't send us a staffer. She came and she met with us on more than one occasion.
Yeah. And outside, and I'll let you finish and with a closing thought here, Dr. Darity, in a second. But I just wanted to call out the fact that not only is H.R. 40 being pushed by social groups like, or quote unquote social justice groups like NCOBRA, NARC, et cetera, but we're also seeing, our historically black organizations showing a lot of support for H.R. 40. And it makes me wonder if they even read it, because this right now reads like a slush fund to me. So I'm saying,
well, that's a big issue. I'm not sure, not just our historically black organizations, but there are a number of white philanthropic groups that are supporting H.R. 40. I think people see this as a chance to signal that they're on the right side of history. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that they've actually paid much attention to the content of the bill.
And that's my point, because leading up to this in the presidential primaries, when asked a question about reparations, almost 100% of the candidates answered that question with, I support Sheila Jackson Lee's Bill H.R. 40. That was the rote response that we were getting from candidates on the campaign trail. And now what we see is that H.R. 40 is not a bill of reparations. It is a bill of, compensation for a small group of people that will, at the end of the day,
tremendous amount of power,
leave us all behind. And I'm just going to quickly go through some of the names of the organizations that have signed off on H.R. 40 and S-1083. We've got the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, Al Sharpton and the National Action Network, NCOBRA, the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, the ACLU, the Nation of Islam. The list goes on and on here of groups that are endorsing what amounts to a money grab, the way it's currently written, as far as I can tell.
So the question becomes, and we have a limited time. We're in the last final minutes of this show here today. So question is, should ADOS continue to support this bill, or should we, without any changes to it, should we replace it, and should we move on, possibly drafting our own bill?
Well, given the failure to provide an opportunity for the bill to be critically discussed, and the failure to provide an opportunity for the bill to be revised, my thinking is at this point, it's important to write a new bill altogether and move away from H.R. 40.
Absolutely.
Okay, we got breaking
Absolutely.
news. I didn't know that
We're breaking news.
politics
We're breaking news now.
and Black could break some news. But breaking news, Sheila Jackson Lee has stepped down from the judiciary and from the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation.
I did read a story about there's a criminal allegation of one of her former staffers,
right?
Yeah, that she may have not given the proper attention to. Let's just say that.
Well,
that's quite the story.
This just makes everything interesting. But as usual,
life in this fight changes daily, right?
Wow.
Oh my gosh, we are out of time with breaking news.
Dr. Darity, any closing thoughts on HR 40, on the reparations push, anything that you want to end here with?
No, we just have to stay unified and keep pushing.
Yes.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you, Dr. Darity. I know I tell you this a lot, but the work that you're doing has changed all of our lives and has put us on a path to true restitution and redress in this country. So please continue doing the work. Please continue speaking out. I know you will, but I have to say that still. But thank you again, Dr. Darity, for not only being here, but for supporting us in everything that you do.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All righty, folks. This has been an action-packed 1 hour. We have to, of course, thank Dr. Darity for being with us, for stepping up with particularly short notice. If you have not read From Here to Equality, it is a must-read. It lays out history. It lays out the reasons why. It refutes the questions that we are often pushed with, my people didn't own slaves. I didn't. It wasn't me. We died in the Civil War. We're going to wrap up things here with this note, but thank you so much for tuning in. We
want you guys to hear from ADOS Houston quickly. They've done an excellent job of putting together a promo for HR 40 and the edits that are needed that you just heard Dr. Darity speaking about. So after this quick promo, we're going to come back and we're going to wrap up this episode.
Hello, my name is Cam-Marie from ADOS Houston. And right now, HR 40, the Congressional Bill for Reparations, is seriously flawed. But it can be fixed by implementing changes proposed by Dr. Sandy Darity. The Commission should be directed to set as eligible recipients Black American descendants of United States slavery. Eligible recipients would need to show they have at least one ancestor who was enslaved, a lineage standard, and were at least 12 years prior to the enactment of a reparations plan or a study commission, whichever comes first. They self-identify as Black, Negro, or African American, an identity standard. The relevant window for the Black American claim for reparations dates from 1776 to present, not 1619 as the bill currently reads. Since the claim for redress must be made on the U.S. government, the beginning date for the claim should be associated with the founding of the Republic, not the landing of enslaved persons at Jamestown, Virginia. Sheila Jackson Lee. ADOS Houston is standing for all voters by calling on you to fix HR 40 before the House Judiciary Committee moves the bill, because lineage matters in Third Ward.
All right, we're back, folks, to wrap up this episode. So you were here, you heard from the expert in the field, Dr. William Sandy Darity. He has laid out all the issues with HR 40 as it currently stands. He has not been engaged by anyone in Congress that is working on this bill. His revisions continue to be ignored. And right now, as this bill is currently written, it represents a slush fund for just a small group of people. This is not reparations or anything that will lead to reparations. So, I'm in the camp that if we can't get these edits, it's time to scrap this bill and start all over, as you heard Dr. Darity say Friday.
Look, we'll be back September 13th, 2020. Tune in to Politics in Black. We'll have a new hot topic, a new show for you, always in the reparations space. But it's time to move on is what the tea leaves are telling us. That's what it's telling us. Anyway, Thank you all for tuning in for another episode of Politics in Black. Until next time,
thanks, everybody.
I am Friday Jones on social media.
I am Chad _Boogie.
We'll see you next time.
Peace, people.